Hi everyone, my name is Katerina Stoikova and I'm the founder and senior editor of Accents Publishing. Dear friends, thank you for being here. Good to see your faces, even though we're meeting on a sad occasion, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. This has brought tremendous suffering upon the Ukrainian people. The question arises, what can we do to help? The only thing worse than being in pain is being in pain alone. I thought that first and foremost, we can show solidarity and support. We are poets and writers. Our weapons are words, and we have a few to share with the Ukrainian people and anyone else who would listen. We need to start somewhere, and I decided to start with the people whose words I respect, admire, and support, the Accents authors, people whose work Accents has been proud to publish. While words of support are vital, it is critical at this point to pitch in and show support for those who fight, those who resist, those who have stayed behind, those who provide humanitarian relief on site, and those who serve refugees. There are dozens of organizations who can make use of every and any donation. I personally, as well as my family, donated to the Ukrainian Red Cross. Here is my personal story. I was in the Ukraine in October 2014. I was invited to participate in the Terra Poetica International Poetry Festival as an American poet. I cannot tell you how special that was for me to represent American poetry. I made friends with poets from Ireland, Scotland, Macedonia, Poland, Israel, Lithuania, Georgia, Bulgaria even, and other countries. I met a number of Ukrainian poets, writers, and people of culture. I will say again that these are the kindest and most generous people I've ever encountered. I was shown respect, generosity, and kindness without anyone ever asking anything from me in return. Also, I had never before or since seen larger audiences showing up to listen to poetry. Enormous multi-level theaters packed with people who showed up and were intensely present. I saw people who truly celebrated the written word. We saw Kiev, Zhytomyr, and other places where Putin is dropping bombs now. Another thing that left impression on me was that Ukrainians refused to speak Russian. Not everyone spoke English, and I couldn't understand Ukrainian. If I wanted to converse with people who did not speak English, I would say something in Russian because I'd studied Russian in school, and they would answer in Ukrainian. They were rejecting the language of the oppressor. Now let's read for the Ukraine. I've written everyone's name on a piece of paper and I'll draw it and we'll read. Thank you again for being here and lending the power of your words. Accents, authors for Ukraine. And the first to read today is Tina Parker, the author of Lock Her Up.
Hi, good evening. I want to send peace in hopes that peace will be restored and with the safety and stability that is your right. I'm reading a poem called Double V. Double V. A bonnet for my girl, the yarn spun blue. At rest she lies beyond calm. Ribbons woven, choke sky. I can't hold the scissors tight enough. They slip slice, the seam unravels, time pulls in my hands.
Thank you, Tina. Now, the next Accents author to read will be Jennifer Litt, the author of Strictly from Hunger. Please unmute yourself, Jen.
Dear Ukrainians, I'm sure you're all familiar with the expression going to the dogs, which means to become ruined, to change to a much worse condition, which makes me think of the havoc being wreaked on your country. There's also another aspect to dogs, a more positive one, that Mark Doty explores in his poem Golden Retrievals, where the golden retriever symbolizes the ability to live in the present, to be here now, to be Zen, a luxury not afforded to you in these difficult times. I'll read Golden Retrievals and then read my poem called The Moon is a Friend for the Lonesome, that contains an allusion to the Doty poem. Golden Retrievals. Fetch. Balls and sticks capture my attention seconds at a time. Catch? I don't think so. Bunny, tumbling leaf, a squirrel who's, oh joy, actually scared. Sniff the wind, then I'm off again. Muck, pond, ditch, residue of any thrillingly dead thing. And you? Either you're sunk in the past, half our walk, thinking of what you never can bring back, or else you're off in some fog concerning tomorrow. Is that what you call it? My work, to unsnare time's warp and woof, retrieving my haze-headed friend, you. This shining bark, a Zen master's bronzy gong, calls you here entirely now. Bow wow, bow wow, bow wow. The moon is a friend for the lonesome. When it slips behind a cloud, you return to the poem about the dog and how it retrieves the moment. You live on a quiet street near a Zen center, but the truth is you wouldn't make it as a Buddhist. Your desire to worry the past and predict the future, anathema to monks who create mandalas from colored sand swept into jars, returned to water, blessed. A few stars poke through the hazy night. You wish you could pin one to your chest. My dear Ukrainians, with the star from my poem, I deputize myself in support of your fight for democracy. Pray for peace in the Ukraine, for the blessings of peace of mind, for the luxury of existing in the moment without worry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next Accents author to read in support for Ukraine is Tom Hanley.
Well, I can't think of anything original to say to people of Ukraine. I'm just going to quote one of my favorite movies. This aggression will not stand. And I'm going to read the title poem from my chapbook, Scotch Tape World. Taping my thigh and calf together at the knee, I contemplate taking my children to Scotch Tape World, where stars fall from the sky like posters from my office door, where the tires could fly off our car at any moment. It's time they learn that life is like that Disney lies in the way of a true education. God never lies, but he's still in trouble. Why else would he have to clean all the blackboards on which we are unsolved math problems? Our prayers go to heaven, but first they go through Scotch tape world. Torn in transport, they're pierced back together and presented to God, who receives them as music rather than as words. Holding your breath, waiting for people to be decent is one way to go to God, who loves us just as he loves the notes that David's harp wrote to him. Low clouds overhead seem to come apart as if held together by cheap Scotch tape. Such a pointless death, like the one suffered by my first car, not to mention Kenneth Patchen, who wrote, "The animal I wanted couldn't get into the world," and other lines penned, as Valerie said, by someone other than the poet to someone other than the reader. Our prayers might be missives from someone other than us to someone other than God. Behind my beard is a face that's different from the one my wife married years ago. Behind any given joke is the funk that made us look for laughter. If you don't know what I mean, you'll wake up one day knowing. You'll look up and see sunlight hitting a mountain so hard they both seem ready to shatter.
Thank you, Tom. Next is Jeremy Payden, the author of Broken Tulips.
Yes, hello, and I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly as a word to speak to the people of Ukraine. Trimysia. I hope that means stay strong. Our hope is that you will stay strong, and our hope is that peace will come in this madness. And I'll be reading the title poem of my collection, Broken Tulips, that is about beauty and about madness and about the desire to create beauty from madness. Broken Tulips. It has an epigraph, and it reads, "One day it will affect us again in this or another form. From the bitter smell of tulips," by Zbigniew Herbert. Men have squandered fortunes on the promise of beauty stored in corms like these descendants of flowers from the mountains of Tien Shan. The Semper Augustus, the Viceroy tulip, Baroque treasures from the old Silk Road, fleeting accidents of beauty, the bulb slowly consumed by a virus, the symptom, feathered or flamed patterning in the petals. With soiled gloves and trowel in hand, gently brush the mulch away, dig down 10 inches into the sandy dirt, and plant those bulbs that will bloom with ivory streaks staining the crimson turban of the head. Cradle those shallot lookalikes. Recite the names as you place them. These are not metaphors. Ice folly, single late, burning heart. Blessings to you, Ukraine.
Thank you, Jeremy. And now we'll hear from Lita Kendrick, the author of And Luckier.
Thank you. To the people of Ukraine, I have to say my heart is breaking at the death and destruction that is happening there. And our hearts are breaking for you, but your courage and your spirit, your resolve, and the resolve of everyone who's going back in to help have brought something out in all of us, and we will not forget. We know that you are fighting, not just for you, but for all people who love democracy. I'm going to read a poem from my book, And Luckier, called How to Go On. Someone is building a cardboard house over a grate, an office building down the street, a lean-to in a tent city, a backyard shed, a room built of a gaze, 2 pairs of eyes tinted by a jacket, where 2 sleep on the ground. Only one more night, she whispers, hoping it is true. Someone is picking up the pieces of the ruined house on the bombed street in Syria and Baghdad in the Afghan village after the suicide bomb, on an island after the storm. But these are rocks, these thoughts, these fragments of what I want to build, of what was here, is already here, is dreamed. The unbroken sidewalk back, the lighted window, the beds, not in metal cages, the table in a single kitchen, the food on the plate. I am hoisting one word at a time. I am speaking to the ones in charge. I am saying so much suffering. We cannot uncause it, but we can set ourselves to mend. We can say, this is not the way to build a world. I will pick up the rubble. I will carry one stone at a time.
Thank you, Lita. Next is Andrew Merton, the author of Final Exam.
Thank you, Katerina. I'm in awe of the people of the Ukraine, both those who have stayed to fight and those who have felt the need to leave the country. I'm the son of a refugee. My father was a German Jew who fled the Nazis in 1936 when he was 23 years old. It changed his whole life. And as it will change yours, those of you who are fleeing, but have hope. That's all I can say. My poem is about my father and his flight from Germany. It's called Smoke. On July 31st, 1932, the Nazis won 229 seats in the Reichstag, while in Frankfurt, the Jew who would become my father sank a 16-foot putt to become, for a month or so, the top-ranking golfer in Germany. He was 19 then. His prize, a silver cigarette box, was one of the few things he brought with him 6 years later on the boat to New York. He was a short, strong man, built to withstand wind. He wore a trench coat and a fedora. Often a cigarette hung from his lips. Whether any of this attracted the Jew who would become my mother, I cannot say. Maybe it's just that they were on the same boat, steaming away from the cauldron. As for the rest, after Europe burned, he built a business, fathered 2 children, bought a ranch house on Long Island, was cremated after dying young on the 14th green of a country club in Queens, his putter in one hand, a smoke in the other.
Thank you, Andy. Next is Anatoly Molotkov.
Good afternoon, folks. Sorry, I was a little late. Some difficult time. It's a difficult time to be Ukrainian. It's a kind of shameful time to be of a Russian descent, as I am. I left in 1990 before the Soviet Union had broken down, and it's been painful to see the country that I left slide back into authoritarianship, and to see Putin basically play by Stalin's playbook, trying to attack these different places and attack the press. So I'm feeling a lot of shame, even though I've chosen to take myself out of the equation 32 years ago. Even so, I feel like I could have stayed back. I could have tried to engage. So those are the feelings I'm having. I don't want to read any of my own work because I don't think it's the time for Russian or Russian-born people to try to speak in that way, but I do want to bring your attention to this book. Many of you probably already know this book. It's Deaf Republic by Yuya Kaminsky. It's his second book. I'm going to read a poem from here. It's actually the first poem, and it's gotten a lot of attention lately. It's called We Lived Happily During the War. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling. Invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous rain, in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money. We, forgive us, lived happily during the war. So this poem is obviously critical of the United States too, but of course we can draw certain parallels between what the United States has done, what Russia has done, between figures like Putin and figures like Trump are basically pals, and both operate by the notion that truth doesn't exist. So in his book, Yuya does a book-length dissection of the situation and gets into the real roots of the oppression and how it starts on a local level. It's a wonderful collection. There's also a opinion piece from Ilya on the New York Times. I will share it in our chat here. It's called Poems in a Time of Crisis. It also alludes to this poem that I just read. So I wanted to bring your attention to his work. Also, we'll share some other links for people to keep updated on the news in Ukraine. There is this Russian Jewish American sword Zarina Zabriskie, who does a lot of work in unveiling Putin's crimes and Trump's crimes and the connections between. So I'll share a couple of links. Check them out later in the chat. And thank you very much, Katerina, for inviting me. I wish Ukraine all the best in this war against this completely illegal and criminal oppression, criminal attack that is absolutely unjustified.
Thank you. Thank you, Anatoly. Next, we will hear from Barbara Goldberg. Barbara Goldberg is the author of Kingdom of Speculation, and I think that she has a blurb by Ilya Kaminsky, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
I do. He wrote a blurb that was so lovely, it became the introduction. Anyway, he's doing a lot. He's on Twitter every day with things going on. Of course, I also, my heart goes out. And like, what was it, Andrew? I'm also from a refugee background and was saved by a Portuguese consulate in France, Aristide Sousa Mendes, who wrote 30,000 transit visas the weekend that the Germans entered France. So I'll read a poem called Furlough. It doesn't concern Ukraine, but it almost does. Furlough. I love to see those tall, lean, muscular men with their clean-shaven heads and digital watches toss their kids in the air. And I love to see them drop, not weightless, but light as grenades. This is how children learn that fear can be fun. And fathers, that this too is hand-to-hand combat. To cradle or kill, what story do we tell ourselves to justify? that a dunam of earth is worth dying for, that a child opening his mouth with an O of pleasure overturns everything. We grow like onions, our heads buried in dirt, and we die like onions, face down in a pot of boiling water. Gravity causes all to fall down, and love to hold things up. And I just want to say that when I see the women and children leaving with their few possessions, rushing, it just makes me feel like they didn't have time to really say a proper farewell to their homes and to their lives, their former lives. And from here on in, everything changes for them. And thank you, Ilya, and all the others in this country who are doing so much for the Ukrainian people.
Thank you, Barbara. And our next accents for Ukraine reader is Barbara Sabo, the author of Original Rus.
Thank you, Katerina. I'm glad to be here tonight. And I'd like to say to the Ukrainian people that our hearts and our thoughts are with you every day, almost every hour, waking hour of every day. So, and as someone already said, stay strong. It's very, I'm very moved and very inspired by your resilience and your strength. And I'm going to read a poem about what sustains us in difficult times. It's called To the Grocery List. It's one of those little things, making a grocery list when you're, you sort of can't do anything else at that moment. And I'm sure making a grocery list would feel like a luxury to you now. But my hope is that you will find those things that sustain you, whatever they may be, whatever is at hand, whatever is possible in any given moment to sustain you through this difficult time. To the grocery list. This incantation of greens and grains, rosy citrus in season, appeases with textures and odors rising from scrap paper. Add the alchemists, butter, flour, subtleties of roux, scant ballast against earth's slack-jawed hunger. Splitting the over-leavened bread, and the sea spills from its immense bowl, salting the land. What can the hands do but knead and blend? The fingers themselves marvel, and the tongue in every living language weeps. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Our next reader is Richard Taylor, the author of Fading into Bulimia.
Thank you, Katerina. I want to begin with a little reflection. I've thought a lot about Ukraine and the trials that Ukrainians are undergoing. And I thought, oddly enough, of a German war memorial at El Alamein in North Africa. And the legend is the price of pride is very high, paid for by the young. And what has made this war so painful for many of us is that we know everyone is suffering, and bombs don't discriminate. Instead of reading a poem of my own, I'd like to read one by Czesław Miłosz, entitled In Warsaw, 1945. What are you doing here, poet, on the ruins of St. John's Cathedral this sunny day in spring? What are you thinking here where the wind blowing from the fistula scatters the red dust of the rubble. You swore never to be a ritual mourner. You swore never to touch the deep wounds of your nation, so you would not make them holy with the accursed holiness that pursues descendants for many centuries. But the lament of Antigone, searching for her brother, is indeed beyond the power of endurance. And the heart is a stone in which is enclosed like an insect, the dark love of a most unhappy land. I do not want to love so. That was not my design. I did not want to pity so. That was not my design. My pen is lighter than a hummingbird's feather. This burden is too much for it to bear. How can I live in this country where the foot knocks against the unburied bones of kin? I hear voices, see smiles. I cannot write anything. 5 hands seize my pen and order me to write the story of their lives and deaths. Was I born to become a ritual mourner? I want to sing of festivities, the greenwood into which Shakespeare often took me. Leave to poets a moment of happiness, otherwise your world will perish. It's madness to live without joy and to repeat to the dead whose part was to be gladness of action in thought and in the only 2 salvaged words, truth and justice. Our hearts are with you, and I hope our joint readings tonight will confer some benefits and some solace on you brave people. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And we have 2 more names here. And the next one is me. And I'll read to you a poem from my book, The Porcupine of Mind. It's called The Most. Welcome, last resort. We meet at last, Plan Z. I've heard a lot about you, worst case scenario. I look forward to working with you when all else fails. It's going to be you and I now. Do you feel lucky to end up with me? Hey, it's okay. After the initial shock wears off, you too will try to make the most of me. And for the Ukrainian people, stay strong, stay safe, and we love you. Next is Jay McCoy, the author of The Occupation.
Thank you, Katerina. And to the people of the Ukraine, I want to say, stay strong. We're watching, I'm watching, and I specifically would like to say for a good friend of mine's friend, Victoria, and her 9-year-old daughter, Natasha, who are making their way from southwestern Kyiv to the Polish border, that you're in my heart and prayer every day and every moment. And this is a very short poem in 2 parts called 2 Insomnias. And there's an epigraph from Rumi, the Sufi poet. Praise God for these 2 insomnias and the difference between them. 1, between respites and revelations, I long for your body melding with mine. to just beyond the miter of obsession and ardor, I discover my joy returns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay, and thank you everyone for coming and lending your voice in support of Ukraine. I will post this reading along with links to donate in support